Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody, Mark and Steve on the PBSE podcast. So good to be with you. This is episode 176. And you'll see the title, If Sex is Optional, How Can a Couple Possibly Stay Connected?
Dun, dun, dun.
We cannot count the number of times we've been asked this question. And in our therapy practices, we have sometimes called sex fasts, periods of time where couples are not engaging in that. We don't have time to go into all the reasons for why that is. But we had a question come in from a PBSE listener who asked specifically about this topic. And she said, hey, I've been binge listening to your podcast for a few days and trying to understand my partner's addiction. I've been able to take away a ton of great stuff, but I have a question. You often say that, quote, sex is optional. I think I understand the sentiment, but is it truly reasonable that a couple can sustain a relationship without physical connection for the rest of their lives? And I love you and I really had to smile when we heard the extreme nature of her question, right? You can tell that this is a very important issue for them as a couple. Right, because she says, is it reasonable that a couple could sustain their relationship with never having any physical connection whatsoever of any kind for the rest of their lives?
Yes.
Like, whoa, that's pretty black and white, all or nothing,
Yes. Very much. There's a big difference between having sex and living in a box.
No physical connection ever again, ever. But we do appreciate this, appreciate where she's coming from.
Yeah.
And, we chuckle at it, but believe us, I've been where she's coming from, and Steve and I, you have.
Yeah.
And it's a really legitimate question. And it really does, merit us getting into some detail about what this means, right? Why in the world would you ever say sex is optional? What the heck is that all about? And how does it work? Why is it important to even go to that place at all? Maybe we start with why we even use that phrase.
Sex being optional?
Yeah, sex is optional because that comes up in our work with clients all the time.
Yeah, no, let's talk about it. I guess the first reason, and Mark and I would say this because we both can speak from realistic experience about it. Before we started today, I thought about coining a term. We are both sex dependents or recovering sex dependents, or as I'm terming it, sex pendants.
Yeah, recovering sex pendants.
Recovering sex pendants. We both emotionally, physically, and otherwise felt like we could not exist without sex.
Absolutely.
And it went far beyond just that physical dependency. Emotionally, it was even a bigger tie. We talk oftentimes on here and on our Dare to Connect program about how we used to live and die by sex in terms of frequency, in terms of position, in terms of passion level, and how often, right? All of those things became essentially emotional relationship gauges for Mark and I, and
Yeah.
for many of the guys that we work with. If the sex is frequent and awesome and new in a different position every day of the week, then man, we're having an awesome week, and we're having a great marriage. But if we've gone a week or 2 weeks, or it's quote unquote stale, or quote unquote the same old thing, then we must be on the brink of, destruction, marital destruction. And so we definitely speak from both sides, having been from one side to the other. I mean, I guess for me, when I look at at sex being optional, and this is just gospel according to Steve for a second, so bear with me, but sex being optional for me, sex has to be optional for me, because if it's not optional, then I am led around by it.
Mm-hmm.
The degree to which one thing we teach in our Dare to Connect program all the time is the degree to which I need something is the degree to which I cannot choose something. Need and choice have opposite inverse relationships with each other on the same subject. The more something is needed, the less someone can choose something. I can't choose which air to breathe. I just have to breathe oxygen. It's 100% need, 0% choice. It's oxygen or death, right? And the degree to which I need or am beholden to sex is the degree to which I cannot choose sex. Or now that's the first part, because that's the sexual component, right? But I know the next piece that we're going to get into, because I could do a whole podcast on what I just said. But the other piece of this, right, is that we need to separate sex from just physical connection in general, because they are not the same, right?
Well, and I want to add something to that. I mean, my addiction was so deep and so dominant that I became in my life what I call sex centric.
Yeah,
Everything revolved around sex. Everything was interpreted as sexual. Yes. Right? I would just see plain old people and plain old situations in my life around me, and my addict brain would immediately put a sexual template over that. My brain would interpret everyone and everything as having some sexual connotation. Right? Mm-hmm. It's the old ink block, the ink blob test in psychology. Show somebody an ink blot. What do you see? Right? And they'll say, "Oh, I see, some part of the physical anatomy," or I see, right? The joke was that you could show anybody a little ink blotch, and a guy who's obsessed with it would see something sexual no matter what it looked like. It wouldn't matter. And that was very much true for me. Sex centric, everything and everyone. So that's where you get to the place, like you said, it's no longer a choice. It's a need, it's a filter, it's an interpretation, it's a central focus of life. And in order for me to break out of that to where I started to have a choice again, I had to get to the place whether I could accept that, is sex optional in your life? If it isn't optional, then you're going to continue to have the nose, the ring in your nose, being led around by it basically every minute of every day.
Yes.
So it has to be optional if I want to be healthy.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that sentiment, right? If I can't, again, if something is a requirement, it limits to some degree my capacity to choose it. And I have, just speaking to my experience, and I know, Mark, this reflects you, as guys coming from two opposite sides of that coin, of being on both ends of the spectrum, the only way sex has been able to become a healthy part of my life is as it's taken on that optional role.
Yep, right? I would agree.
As it becomes an enhancement to everything else, as opposed to a requirement for, day-to-day functioning and day-to-day living. So,
well, because look at all the things that were connected to sex for us. Today's stressful, sex. Today's hard, go to sex as an outlet to cope and to soothe and to escape.
Yeah.
It became connected to everything.
How to celebrate today. It makes my problems go away. It's how I celebrate the day.
Yeah, things went good. Okay, sex. Things aren't going great. Okay, sex. Whatever, right? I'm bored. I'm burnt out. I'm lonely. I'm stressed. I'm hungry. I'm tired. sex.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. So it is important to again to note that physical connection, sex is a part of physical connection, but sex is not physical connection. Okay.
Right.
There are lots of ways to connect physically, sexually, and non-sexually, romantic and non-romantic. Mark and I would absolutely front and get behind. There's lots of research to show out there that physicality is a critical component to the human condition.
Without
It's
question.
huge. It's
Yep.
huge. We are wired for connection. We are wired for touch. We are touch beings, touch-based beings. That is absolutely critical. But there is a whole spectrum of way to meet physical needs, with sex just being one element of that at the apex top, right?
Mhm.
It's true. It is a very can be, because we're going to get into that in a second. It has the potential to be incredibly connecting and incredibly building, and it is extremely intimate and vulnerable. But it by no means is the only way we can be vulnerable with one another. One of the things we talked about in our Dare to Connect program just a little while ago was we were talking about different forms of intimacy, and Mark's going to talk about that in a minute. But we were talking specifically about physicality and what represents what when it comes to physicality for each partner, right? Each of us have come wired with a template based on our life experience, based on who we are as people, about what holding someone's hand means and the impact that it has on a person. What does that feel like? What does that signify? What does that represent? In what context does it mean what, right? Same is true for hugging, for kissing, for sitting next to each other on the couch, for being just present with each other in close proximity to another person, right? There are all of these other forms of physicality that we as human beings engage in, with this sexual component, this romantic sexual component just being one.
Yeah, just
So
being
we
one.
need to recognize that.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things we talk about a lot in our Dare to Connect program, we talk about the fact that there are, for example, 8 different areas of human intimacy, relationship intimacy. 8 of them, and only one of those 8 is sexual. There's 7 others. 7 other ways that we intimately connect as couples. And we go into great detail on with regard to each of those in our Dare to Connect program, especially as we work with couples. So if you're having trouble knowing what is there with regard to physical connection and intimacy outside of sex, that would be a great reason to come over and join us in Dare to Connect, so that you can learn how to become much more holistic and inclusive and expansive in how this works in your relationship.
Yes.
So if you want to know more about that, come over and see us over at daretoconnectnow.com. You get a two-week free trial. Come and check it out. Come and see what we do over there. This is very much in the space that we're in all the time, what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Love to have you guys come join us.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so in other words, guys, if we just look at even just this one area of intimacy, there's such a depth to it. Now, that does bring up another point that we need to mention, and we talk about this all the time, but sex is not always intimate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. How many people listening have had sex that wasn't intimate?
Lots of people have. Yeah. We say all the time, lots of people have sex. Comparatively few, I think, have intimacy. There's a big difference between those. Sex is what happens in a moment of lust in the backseat of a car late at night, to Josh Groban or whatever. Intimacy is something that is cultivated, that's grown, that is expressed between two people. It's something that is cultivated and really in the healthiest form, we would argue, in the 7 other areas, with the 8th area of physical intimacy coming along and following up and cementing, reflecting, echoing that.
Right? Yeah. We're coming together to connect in those other 7 areas, and the sexual part is just a natural outflow of that connection we're having in all those other ways. It's an icing on the cake in the intimate relationship.
The physicality in general, right? Making, allowing that to become an actual part of one's intimacy, as opposed to, something completely separate, or something that is delved in. I mean, we're just going to come out and say it. We work with couples of all kinds, ways, shape, and forms. Mark and I, we've been doing this a long, long time, personally and professionally. And we are all too aware that, at least speaking to American culture, we have gotten this whole sex versus intimacy thing pretty skewed and out of balance.
Yeah.
We live in a culture where, date number three is I had a guy who say once, date number three is where I want to be. Right. That's sex, right? If we nail the first two dates and things go okay and nothing's wrong, well, then sex is on the table or close to on the table. And not from a conservative or religious perspective, from what Mark and I know about intimacy, how it works, how it's expressed, how to stay authentic versus how to not, as experts in not just what it looks like to be authentically connected, but also as experts in what it looks like to be completely inauthentically connected.
Well, and the big mistake you see made, and I made it in relationships, is we push the sexual side of the relationship prematurely.
Totally.
Before we've developed the emotional, intimate connection in the relationship.
Yep.
Right? You should always lead out with the emotional connection, the emotional authenticity, the emotional vulnerability. And as you build that, and as it becomes more evolved and more complete, and it's growing, you have the sexual side follow it. How many people do we see that reverse that? They lead out with the sex, and then they become very disgruntled and disappointment when the emotional intimacy never comes, or comes, very weakly or disjointedly. And like, how come we're not connected? Right? We just had somebody reach out to us a couple of weeks ago through PBSE where they said, yeah, we got together, and the first 4 months of the relationship was amazing and incredible, and we were so connected, and the sex was great. And then this was a partner, she said, and then all of a sudden he started to become disinterested, and he started to kind of close off. And I'm like, what happened? What happened to the connection we had? And if you step back to look at that, their emotional connection, their spiritual connection, their intellectual connection was weak or not even developed at all.
Sure.
Yeah. And we
absolutely
see that reversed all the time.
And there are so many ways in which that reversal causes problems, far too many to be able to talk about here. D2C, again, great resource to get into that more deep. But anyway, what kind of moving on from that, and
as we say all that, I know that people are going to say, "Oh, these two guys are just a bunch of conservative religious wackos, right? They don't believe in sex." That could not be further from the truth.
Oh no.
We work with our clients all the time about enhancing and deepening and working on their sexual relationship, right? Helping it become more exciting, more adventurous, more amazing. So in no way are we trying to say that at all. We're just trying to say there is a healthy space for it, and there are steps to building that part of the relationship. And if you take them out of order, or unbalanced, or with too heavy a focus on one thing while eliminating the others, you're setting yourself up for great challenges and disconnection.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad that you say that. Well, kind of getting back, as we're wrapping up here, is we need to definitely get to this question. So is it optional? We would absolutely argue that it is optional. But again, that doesn't mean that because as you indicated at the beginning here, Mark, there was kind of an all or nothing, black or white layout, right? Of it's either sex or physical, physical distance in every way, shape, or form. And is sex an optional component of relationship? We would argue yes. We work with couples and clients every day. I can think about people in my practice right now who carry and struggle with serious physical limitations, emotional and mental obstacles and barriers. Sometimes they're trauma based, that all inhibit physical intimacy to a full extension of sexual intercourse for a variety of reasons. And that's pretty consistent.
Yeah. Right? I actually know quite a number of, not just in my practice, but quite a number of people personally, and I'll just name them very quickly. And this will sound crazy to some people, but I have a very close friend where early in their marriage, they were having trouble sexually. They went into their medical doctor, and there were a bunch of tests. It was actually discovered that his wife is allergic to him. If they have intercourse, she has a severe allergic reaction to her husband. Can you imagine? So they've not been able to have intercourse their entire marriage. Her life is literally at risk if they come together that way. So they've been married almost 50 years now. And their marriage is not involved that part of the relationship. It can't. But they have this beautiful, romantic, hold hands, hug, kiss, this wonderful romantic relationship, but it does not include many parts of sex. So how have they been able to stay close and be friends and have this wonderful intimacy all these years with that being the case? Right? I have another friend who basically his wife developed early onset dementia, and she went into an almost coma-like state. For 10 years, he took care of her. Imagine 10 years she was an invalid. And I would say they had one of the most beautiful, connected, compassionate, loving relationships I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So how is that possible?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Guys, there are so many different levels and depths to exploring connection in a committed relationship. Frankly, it goes exponentially deeper than most of us even realize or are connected with. Mark and I are recovering shallow guys. Our whole lives used to revolve around sex and orgasm and when's it going to happen and how and where and with who. And we definitely reference with that world, but having moved to a different place, we can tell you that there's just so much nuance to all these different ways of connecting. Mark mentioned those 8 areas of intimacy. Relationships can have a richness to them that, if done in the right way, kind of takes things to the next level in terms of just their depth and their scope and how far they can go. And we would love to have you guys come join us. We'd love to talk to you more about that, how we do that with couples and with individuals every single day. Lots more to cover. We hope that you'll consider joining us on D2C. We love and appreciate you guys. We've got a bunch of submissions lately lined up. For upcoming episodes. So we're excited to be talking about some good things. Yep. We're heading into the summer months. We know that's a hard time for a lot of those who struggle for different reasons. So we'll be sure to keep an eye to that as we move forward, answering questions and addressing issues as well. But as always, let's give an assignment.
That's
right. I totally forgot the assignment. So sorry about that.
Let's close up with an assignment for all of you about.
We even made a note and I forgot.
If sex is optional, how can a couple possibly stay connected? It's the podcast. So we want to give all of you an assignment. This assignment's going to involve what might be some uncomfortable, awkward vulnerability and authenticity as you sit down. We invite you to sit down and talk about that physical intimacy, sexual side of your relationship. What does that mean for each of you? Right? How do you feel about it? Is it fulfilling? Is it not? What ways could it be better? What ways is it good? Have you ever actually had a talk about that? Our sexual relationship. How do you feel about it? Right? Where are the gaps? Where would you like to see it go? What are some of the sexual things that we engage in together as a couple right now? What do they mean to you or to each of us? I mean, I'm going to be bold. So when we have, for example, oral sex, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. What does that signify?
What does that mean to you? Or do you feel safe? Is that comfortable? Is it healthy? Right? Really daring to sit down and talk about all the various aspects about this. And here's a big, big question. Boy, if somebody had asked me this one, I would have just kind of looked at them like a deer in the headlights. If your relationship, for some reason, were to suddenly be completely absent of sex, let's say it wasn't possible, like some of the friends I've told you about. If that part of your relationship was suddenly off the table, where would your relationship be? Would it still be close? Would it still be fulfilling? Would it still be intimate? Would it still be connected? And why or why not? Right? These are great questions to look at.
Yes, absolutely. Mark, thank you for bringing up the assignment. I was about ready to wrap us up and we talked about all of it. Well, thanks everybody again for tuning in. As always, if you'd like to have questions answered here on the podcast, you're welcome to reach out to us. Questions, comments, and feedback at pbsepodcast.com. And again, for more information about taking recovery to the next best level, we would argue, head over to daretoconnectnow.com. Take a look at the 2-week free trial there. Come join us and see what the buzz is about. You will be glad you did. We love you. We appreciate you. Have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you next week.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.